this plant has grown way off its moss pole over here, and it's too thick for me to actually manipulate this plant. So I'm not too sure what to do with it, but I know that I need to give this plant somewhat of a fundamental reset to make this more manageable and enjoyable to look after. Yes, big leaves are great, but I also want to enjoy the process of looking after it. So in today's video, we're gonna tame this beast. Bigger is better. But is it? Not always. When it comes to houseplants, I'm definitely striving to grow my plants into really nice large statement pieces. But at some stage they can get too large for me to really manage them in an indoor setting. When I moved in here, I just chucked my Philodendron Glorious in the corner and I haven't touched it since. Now, because I wasn't really able to care for it properly and even take it out of its pot, I have no idea if I'm doing enough watering. I have no idea if there's water accumulating in the pot. I was not able to clean the leaves, so you've got a lot of extra floral nectaries causing some visual damage to the leaves. And the plant has grown way off its moss pole. So basically it growing so nice and large might have made it look really nice, but it has become so unmanageable that it's not going to look really nice in the long run. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about finding a compromise. Of course, I want to get my plants to grow nice and large, but at the same time, I want to have an easy time managing these plants. So I really need to give my Philodendron Glorious a bit of a reset. But before we can do that, I need to clear out this room a little bit. I need to give myself a bit of space to really operate in here and get on top of my Philodendron Glorious, because quite frankly it's too large to move back through the door frame without already causing quite a bit of damage to the plant by having to squeeze it and really push it to get through that. So I want to do whatever I have to do in here. I don't really know what I have to do yet. I haven't really come up with a proper plan. I'm just going to wing it based on what I see is happening at the back over there. So first things first, let's clean things out. Let's make a bit of room, because I'm also worried that I'm going to take all the other poles with me while manipulating the Glorious. So yeah, and then that will probably give us a better chance to actually look at the issue at hand as well. Also guys, this room is actually tiny and really hot. I don't have air conditioning in here. It is, look at this. That 89% humidity is killing me. It's been raining like crazy the last couple of days. Just overnight I had this much water accumulate in some of my pots that were outside. Just over one bloody night. So there was a lot of rain coming through, but at the same time it's still really nice and hot, and the sun comes out, it just basically turns into a bloody sauna. And I don't have aircon in here, so I have a fan here. So if you hear a lot of in the background, that's the fan. Can you see everything? Look at this beautiful splendid. Can't really see it right now. Okay. And then I've got this table with my mother lights in the middle. Is this too dark? I've chosen to film with the lights on. Alright, let me show you what I mean. I hope this is somewhat visible. So Philodendron Glorious has a lot of extra floral nectaries. Extra floral nectaries are like little sugars that the plant gives up, and they're usually on the back side of the leaf, sometimes on the petiole as well. And that sugar is to either attract beneficial insects or to deter pests. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might also depend on the species. But this one is prolific in doing it, and usually I try and kind of wipe it off, because if you leave it on there, it can eventually cause damage. Now all of these extra floral nectaries have actually caused some molding on the back because it's wet and it's stuck in the corner. There's no longer good airflow over there. So as a result of that, you can see some visual damage on the leaves at the front. Now also I think with my Second latest move, not the latest one, I dropped it and it ripped a little bit. Some of the leaves at the top aren't really getting that much light anymore or are kind of pushing into the ceiling. And the last, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nodes haven't even attached to the moss pile. So obviously it not attaching to the moss pile, it's relying on the root system somewhere down there, blah, blah. Not giving the plant the best chance of actually growing nice. So I almost think this plant has grown too large to look nice, or too large to continuously increase, if that makes sense. So I really gotta get on top of this, and I'm really sweaty. Hang on, we need to shit. Stay. 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 Sorry, I have a fan down there to stop you from overheating, but I think we need to share the fan every now and then. Oh, this is good. Okay, so I didn't think this through. I didn't get a knife yet. You don't move. I'm gonna go get a knife. Don't move. Stay. Success. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is really the last node that is close-ish to the moss pile. Maybe I need to cut it here. So you can see the plant was kind of growing up its moss pole over here and then kind of started twisting around the moss pole and did almost like, oh my god, it almost did like a full 360 around the moss pole. Obviously I would love to put a new moss pole on here, and I don't I don't know. Honestly at this stage I don't know, it's too big of a mess for me to kind of really assess at this stage. I think I just need to do it and then live with the consequences. So I want to chop this here, but I don't think this would actually come off the pole if I do that right now. So let me first remove the garden stake. So it's kind of like we need to follow a bit of a modified chop and extend process, because the chop and extend process relies on the plant having grown roots into the pole in the first place. Now this plant has grown roots into it, but the last 5 nodes or so have not, right? So that's kind of what's going to prevent me from being able to do the chop and extend. I need to slide this out. Whee! Actually, this is where the moss pole extension is. Ah, perfect. So we are actually going back to normal chop and extend. So let me disconnect the top from the bottom. Oh my god. Trying to reach the knife that's on that table there. Okay, and then I'll chop through the stem here. Clean, sharp knife. I actually bought new knives, which made me realize how incredibly blunt my knives were before. Because this one is actually sharp. Oh, okay. Got that, and honestly, I just need to chop through the pole as well. Come on. Come on. Got it. Okay. All these petioles are connected via twine as well. You think this can cut twine? Come on. Oh, glad I was just giving a warning about how sharp the knife is and then I fling it around like a child. No! Okay, I think we're getting there. Guys, this is how my repots look like realistically. Whee! Okay. This is the top part now. Okay, now I can show you a bit closer. So, you can see how thick the stem is that I just cut. And then this is the last node that kind of made somewhat of contact with the moss pile. So I'm definitely gonna free this from the moss pile. Just gonna try and recover as many roots as possible. And yeah, all of these nodes have decent roots. If I put this in water, I don't know if you can see this, if I just pop this in water over here, these roots will expand really quickly, and I think then I'll put it on a moss pile. So I think there's a bit of, maybe not, I don't know, we'll need to see, but for now I'm gonna park this on the side. The cut needs to callus over a little bit anyway. Oh my god. If you've ever cut a philodendron before, you know that very distinct philodendron smell after you cut them. Like, it just smells so green. Okay, now let's have a look at what is left over here of that mother plant. Alright, let me turn this around for you. Now this is obviously a bit of a mess, and I'm specifically thinking that this last leaf over here, it's not very pretty anyway. I don't think I necessarily need to keep this, but obviously the whole purpose of this bottom pole will now really be to just reshoot. It's not terrible, is it? Actually, I think it's fine. You know what? I'll leave it exactly as it is. But I wanted to lift it off out of its pot. Oh, okay, nice. No water accumulating. Some healthy roots actually pushing out the bottom, which makes me think this was actually just fine. So, this extension I can work on straight away. Okay, so take my garden stake, pop that back in here. Now, if you want to learn more about this plant and how I grew it so large in the first place, I have a full video, a plant spotlight on this specific plant, but the principles of how I got it so large apply to all of my plants, right? I didn't do anything special for this one that I did, that I wouldn't have done for another plant. I think over here, the reason why this plant has matured so quickly is in its DNA. It's a hybrid of Philodendron melanochysum and Philodendron Glorious. Don't ask me why they're named so similar, Glorious and gloriosum. So confusing. So it's just in its DNA, and in general I've noticed that with the hybrids, the Splendid as well as the Majestic. Splendid is a hybrid of Melano and Verrucosum, and Majestic is Sodiroy and Verrucosum, and I've noticed that all three of them, the hybrids, grow much faster and size up faster than any of the species of Melano, Gloriosum, Verrucosum or Sodiroy. So I think they refer to it as hybrid vigor. So it's really in the plant's DNA to size up that quickly, which is awesome. So if you want to have a large velvet philodendron, I think Glorious is probably the way to go. Now I can start managing these petioles, but maybe before I do that, I want to give them a good wipe. I will take this plant outside and give her a spray as well. I'll just take a damp cloth and I'll just really gently wipe the leaves clean of this stupid black mold stuff. Oh yeah, okay, sorry. So, because this plant has super long petioles, I mean the petiole is almost the same size as the pole, right? So I could have a leaf at the bottom of the pole, but the leaf is already exceeded the actual pole, right? So chop and extends don't really work that well anymore because the top part of the pole might only have one or two nodes before the plant has actually reached the top of the ceiling. So that's definitely a bit of an issue when your plants get too large, but again, it's a good issue to have, right? Now, these petioles get so long, but they also spread in all directions. Imagine you have a petiole here, a petiole there, a petiole there. The entire room could be taken up by just this one plant. So what I do is I take the petioles and I tie them to the pole. So the pole isn't just a support in this instance, the pole is also kind of a grid that I can use to create a nice display. Now, because I tie the petioles to the pole, the petioles, or like the plant, the leaves will still face the light, if that makes sense. But when you then take the twine off that I used to tie it up against, the petioles look weird, right? That's why some of these are hanging here. This one is hanging down and facing downwards. It's not because it's sad, it's because it's supposed to be tied like this, right? So the leaves obviously adjust based on the positioning that I gave it. It's like a tree in nature. You know, when you grow a tree in nature and you have a support to help the tree actually grows weak because it knows that there's the support. this leaf knows that there's the support tying it to the thing, so it adjusts its petiole. I don't know if that makes sense. But basically, once you start tying up your petioles to the pole, you kind of need to be consistent with it, or when you cut the ties, it's going to look super weird. So I recommend doing it because it's realistically the only way to actually tame this beast and have more than just one plant in this entire room. But if you do it, it's definitely a bit of a commitment to kind of sticking with it, I think. I mean, I'm sure over time the plant would also adjust again, but I don't think. It depends on how long you've had this on for. Look at this. Look how dirty these two leaves were. That's disgusting. And that's just the back side. I haven't done the front side. So, I don't know, I sound like a broken record, but clean leaves are happy leaves. I was not able to really clean these leaves properly because I couldn't even get in there, and I was honestly too worried that getting in there is just gonna make the plant fall over. And sorry, I'm not facing you, but I'm kind of just using the wall to help the leaf not get ripped while I wipe it. Hope you can see this like that. I'll show you a bit more about my petiole tying up technique in a sec. Now these leaves are already quite damaged. I'm actually really keen to chop these off. I might actually chop them off later, see how I feel about the end result. But it's not a bad thing to keep these leaves because I want this plant to reshoot. I might actually even consider chopping the stem somewhere else again to make the plant reshoot in 2 spots. But let's see how we go. Maybe the plant is going to reshoot in a couple of spots without me having to cut it anyway, and then I don't have to cut it again. I'm just worried with these really long petioles and these really big leaves that if I cut some single nodes, that they might just kind of flip themselves around on the moss pole. Okay, these leaves aren't as bad. Not all of them are bad. I think the ones that got the least airflow are the worst. I mean, these leaves are also really old by now, right? And they've gone through 2 moves with me. So I think this is the 3rd place that they all are living in. Like these leaves were growing in my old apartment. So of course they're eventually gonna deteriorate a little bit and get yellow, if it's for the extra floral nectaries or not. But I've just noticed that Glorious has this by far the worst. So yeah, normally I don't do this. I pride myself in being very on top of all of my plant maintenance, and as part of that my chop and extends. And the reason I like to be on top of these is because that way I give these plants the best chances of maturing. You'll notice that the most mature leaves are probably these ones over here, so the last ones that actually still were attached to the moss pole. The top part over there will definitely have smaller leaves because the leaves were no longer attached, or like the nodes that these leaves belong to were no longer attached to the moss pole. Just think about how much water each of these leaves need to fully inflate and to keep inflated in such a warm environment. All of that water needs to come from the root system within the pot if the plant doesn't have a root system within the pole, which is fine, right? Which is what happens in nature often, but we're cheating nature a little bit. We're growing in a concrete jungle, right? So if every node, however, is rooted into the moss pole, then it's almost like every node has its own root system to supply its own leaf and so on. So the leaf has a much easier time getting provided with water and nutrients, and then obviously in combination with sufficient light exposure that enabled me to grow these really nice large leaves quite quickly. As soon as it has grown off the moss pole, there's a decrease in leaf size. Now this plant had also had a couple of flowers, so it has produced inflows for me before. So sometimes the inflows also set it back a little bit from my experience. Okay, I'm done. I really need to get rid of this knife. I'm worried I'm going to walk into it, but just how dirty this is again. Ugh. Right, the front of the leaf is not as bad. I will take it outside and I will just give it a shower later on. Anyway, let's tie this up so I can actually move it out of this room even. Okay, see what I mean? This leaf down here, no, you don't see what I mean. Alright, you see what I mean? This leaf down here is hanging down here. That's because twine was tied up over here. to make it look like this, which made the petiole kind of turn into like a little bendy bit, right? Whereas it normally would be straight. Not a problem, I'm just saying that's a result of me tying up the petioles previously. So yeah, I usually pride myself in being on top of all of my chop and extends, never have the plants kind of grow off the pole and so on, so that I can really optimize its growth. But look, last year I moved twice, this plant was just getting too big to really maneuver around and so on. So I had so many other priorities last year. And I mean, the plant was still growing and I couldn't complain, you know. Honestly, I didn't really know what to do with all of this extra growth. Anyway, so I kind of just left it, was hoping it would sort itself out. Obviously, it would never sort itself out, right? But a man can hope. Oh, I didn't even finish the extension yet. Okay, so I need to do that. So let me show you from the back what I do, because that makes more sense potentially, or maybe from the side. So see, I'm now got the petiole linked up with this piece of twine, and then I use the moss pole, go around the moss pole. Now this twine will eventually snap as if it becomes too wet, and obviously the moss pole is wet, so this is fortunately not a forever solution, but it has always worked well for me. So, and it's nice and soft, so it gives the plant the ability to still grow and not get damaged and so on. So that's kind of why I like it, but I've seen other people use wire and then have just the soft bit that attaches to the petiole. And that's also perfectly fine. Whatever you want to do, I'm just here to kind of explain the principle. You don't need to follow exactly what I do. You don't need to follow anything that I do. You can also just watch and enjoy. I don't care. But that's what I do, and I love it. All right, and then I go into the next one and so on, right? Also, it's not a bad thing if you need to redo it every now and then, because even though the petioles are tied up, they're still moving with the light and so on. So it gives you an opportunity to just rearrange or redo it into a nice display every now and then. But as I said, I haven't touched this plant in a few months, and the twine didn't rip, so everything is fine. Sometimes when I give it a really hard shake, that's when the twine rips. Alrighty. And last one, I'll just tie up over here, and then they're all kind of nicely connected to each other. Also, if you use twine and it rips eventually, it gives you the opportunity to incorporate the next leaf that has grown in the meantime into your little arrangement. I kind of sometimes hook them together as well, to not just bring them closer to the pole, but to bring them closer to each other. Oh my god, I'm getting so sweaty here. Can't wait to go outside, give them a shower, but I've got a feeling it's much worse outside. Alright, now this is the final result. I just noticed I never connected to two poles using cable ties, so I need to do this. Alrighty, I think it looks quite good. I actually think these two could be closer to each other. So I might just take an extra piece of twine. Alrighty, number one is done. I want to take this outside and give it a good spray. But for now, I might just park it here. By the way, I also had this coat hanger, because I was thinking maybe I need to hang it on here while I work with it. I might use this for the second part. The first part was actually much easier than I anticipated. Okay, next up we've got this beast. Now let's see if I hang this up on here maybe. Okay, changed my mind. We need to get rid of this moss pole. We don't need this, it's of no help, but I want to take this plant off the moss pole. I'm usually very much on top of all of my moss pole extensions, because think about it. The first two nodes that were supposed to already grow into, and look, the node will grow the best roots when it's fresh, right? Usually the way plants work is they send all of their growth hormones is what creates the growth, into the newest node. So you will see the best root growth on this node when the node is fresh and the newest node. And then once the roots have grown into the moss pole, then the roots can continuously expand, right? Once they're already nice water roots, at least from my experience. There can be other people that have made different experience, but I suppose I can only talk about my own here. So, if you wait until the plant has grown a couple of nodes off of the moss pole and then you put the extension on it, your plant might already be a third, a quarter, maybe halfway up its extension without having grown any roots into the extension. So now only the third leaf is really going to take advantage of the extension. If you continuously do that, you might just reduce the root system by like a quarter or by a third or by a half, depending on how many nodes the plant can grow on that moss pole in total. So you'll reduce the root mass within the pole, you'll reduce the continuous increase in leaf size usually, you know, because you're giving the plant a bit of a setback because it now has more leaves but not more root system and so on. You might not experience any issues at all, but from my experience, whenever I've gotten a bit lazy or I'm a bit light for my extension, I can see a definite break in the continuous maturity of the plant. And you're going through a chop and extend anyway, so you're already inducing a bit of shock. So I think the goal should really be to, and yes, I'm just chugging it on the floor at this stage, it's already so messy. I think you should, because the chop and extend is already stress enough, I think you should aim at reducing all other shock where you can. So you should have as much roots as you can. You should have a root system in proportion to the size of the cutting. Now, if you have these extra 2 leaves that have grown off the moss pole, those are 2 more leaves that the plant needs to support, but 2 more leaves that have not contributed to the root system within the pole, and so on. So, get where I'm coming at. If you want to grow your plants as nice as possible, as large as possible, as fast as possible, then I think you really need to stay on top of your chop and extends as part of your care. But of course, maybe that's not your goal. Maybe your goal is to just enjoy this hobby as well. I mean, maybe you get enjoyment from growing them nice and large. I don't know. But don't force yourself. If you get stressed out about it, you know, if you're like, oh my God, I need to do this chop and extend and this chop and extend, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, then that's the wrong approach. First and foremost, you still need to enjoy this, right? So all I'm saying is like you need to be realistic. You can't take the lazy approach and not be on top of everything all the time, but then expect the best results. People ask me a lot how I manage to grow my plants so large, and there isn't a magic thing. There isn't that one thing that I do that makes the difference. It's a combination of things. It's good conditions, it's good care, it's good fertilizer, good products that I choose. But first and foremost, it is consistency in everything that I do. I consistently provide them with good care. I consistently provide them with everything they need at the time that they need it. I don't procrastinate. I give them exactly what they want. So the conditions that they're growing in sets the potential, but just because the potential is set does not mean that potential will be realized, right? So you still need to realize that potential. And a lot of people got really not angry, but I got a bit upset about it the other day because I get this comment so often where like, of course your plants are thriving. You live in Australia. Yes, maybe because I live in Australia, I have an advantage because naturally the conditions are more suitable for some of these tropical plants than if you live in Scandinavia, for example. But Australia is a huge place as well, right? We have snowy mountains and we have desert. And if anything, we're talking about growing inside. Look, I'm so far away from my south-facing window. How is this corner of the room? Yes, it's hot and it's humid, but I need to supplement light. In winter, it can easily get really cold in here. Then I need to supplement heat. I do still need to put efforts into supplementing the conditions to set the potential in the first place. But if you say that, yeah, you grow large plants because you're in Australia, you're completely disregarding any of the effort I put into actually realizing their potential. You're giving all credit to the continent that I live on, and you completely ignore the fact that I never miss a watering, I never miss a fertilizing with my watering, I never miss a chop and extend. I never miss looking at plants, and if I see pests, go ahead and treat them, right? I never miss washing my leaves. I always keep them nice and clean. You're completely disregarding all of that work that I'm doing to crystallize that potential and turn the plant into a nice large statement piece, and you're giving all credit to the continent. It would be very discouraging to people that don't live in Australia to hear that. If you don't know better, you might actually think that is true and that you can't get plants to grow this large wherever you live, which is wrong. I've done this video recently where I react to my followers' plant collections. We had people from the coldest city in the world submit videos with amazing plants, thriving velvet philodendron on moss poles. We had people from Germany, from Poland, from South America, from obviously Australia, from Asia, from Africa, from all over Europe, Scandinavia as well, from all over the world, and they all had success using moss poles, because when we grow inside, our conditions are more similar than they're different. Yes, if we're talking about the plants that I popped in my garden and they're just thriving without me doing anything about them, you can definitely give the credit to Australia. Well, not Australia, Sydney. Well, not even Sydney. Sydney in itself has different climate zones, right, or different weather. You can give the credit to exactly the conditions that I've got in my garden. Fair enough, but when it comes to these plants that are growing indoors, if I wouldn't water them for a month, they'd be dead. So, rant over. I'm just freeing up the roots from the moss pole and assessing what it looks like, and this root system is very, very poor. So, very terrible root system on here, which is fine, not really. I mean, there was only a couple of roots that actually made contact with the moss pole in the first place, so I'm not shocked necessarily, but I'm not stoked about it. Now, I have a couple of options. I could propagate this before I pot it up, or I can just pot this up and hope for the best. I do think I could put them on a moss pole already. I have an idea. One moment, please. I'll go to the garage. Oh wow, it smells so much like philodendron in here. When you come back in here, you can really smell it. Not a bad thing. I like philodendron smell. Alright, I think I have decided to give this plant a grow vertical pole. And we just need to give up on this being a clean exercise, right? We are just acknowledging that this is going to be an absolute mess. And we are embracing it. So I put the grow vertical together. Now I made the decision to keep all 12 squares on the grid, which means that the moss pole is quite shallow, not super deep, but quite wide. I could have also cut the mesh, keep the plastic the same length, and then it would be a deeper pole, but not as wide. So, reason why I've done that is because the stem in itself is quite thick, so it gives the stem a little bit more room to move left and right without coming off of the pole. But at the same time, I don't actually need that much room for roots. There's only one plant on here, and by now the plant actually has no roots, or hardly any. So I don't need to create more room for roots necessarily. I want to reuse all of this moss. I'm just going to see if there's any dead roots in here. Let me put some moss in here. Guys, and I hope this gives you a realistic insight into how chaotic some of my repots sometimes are. You know, the repots that I normally film, like my chop and extends and so on, it's like the 20th time of doing a chop and extend. Like, I know exactly what I need, exactly how to go about it, all of that, right? There's no ambiguity. I know exactly what I need to do, so I'm pretty organized with what I say in the sequence of events. But Sometimes you gotta pivot a little bit and adjust your approach and be flexible, and then it looks like this, chaos. And it's fun, isn't it? Alright, now I have taken this big pot down here, heavy pot, because I am going to use this pot to help myself propagate this plant. Now, I hope. What I need to do is I need to attach this plant to this pole. Okay, let's do that. And I do not have cable ties big enough for that. I hope you can see me by now. The camera is so far away, I can't see the framing anymore. But what I can do is I can combine a few cable ties together to make a big cable tie. Ideally, I would do this with Tim's help, I think. But I also want to give him the bottom part of this pole as a little surprise, so then it might not really be a surprise anymore. Anyway, he didn't have time to help today, which is fine. I love a good challenge, and if I can do it by myself, then nobody has any excuse. In general, I try to make all of my tutorials, all of my things that I do, so that anybody who doesn't have the luxury of having somebody helping them can also do it. I hate asking for help, and I like doing things my way in my time. So that's why I developed all of these techniques to work by yourself. No need for a second person. Trust issues all the way. Okay, so I fiddled this weird cable tie thingy on here, so I put it through the moss pole, and okay, so now I just need to tighten them. So I'll tighten them very slowly. It's working. Have a look at this. Ta-da! Okay, so two options. I could either just pop it in here and just flake a little bit of moss in there. Not necessarily to create a proper medium, but more to create really humid air that this plant is then gonna grow roots into. The alternative is to pop it straight in aeroid mix and hope that that is humid air enough for the roots to grow. I'm also relying on some of these roots to just grow into the moss pole, and then from the moss pole grow into the aeroid mix down below eventually. You know what? No risk, no fun. I think propagating it in moss would be technically a little less, oh my god, less, oh look at that reaction. I reckon propagating it in moss would technically be a little bit less risky, but also less fun. So let's go with potting it up straight away. Okay, let's tame this moss pole first so that it is less front heavy, because, well, the closer I get these petioles to the pole, the more central the center of gravity will be, the less likely it's going to fall forwards, and that will then determine how much tilt I need to plant it up with. So, well, at least this one we're really good at already, because we've done this a few times now. Okay, now I acknowledge that this looks odd, because the stem used to grow like this, right, kind of off the moss pole, and then it had the leaves coming off, and the leaves look nice. Now I moved the stem upwards, so obviously the petioles are now pointing in the wrong directions, but it will adjust. So again, I have the twine here for now, Let me show you what I've done with the twine. I have the twine here for now, but this is also just a temporary solution, right? Once these leaves adjust to looking normal, facing the light, then I don't need to do this anymore. Now, next one, I need to do the pot. And this needs a decent backwards tilt. Now, it doesn't look the bestest, but it's stable. But this mess is driving me insane. Let's get out of here. Ah! Bloody hell, it is sunny over here. Alright, let's bring them out. Whee! Number one. Alrighty, I also want to give them a little bit of nutrients. So I've got GT Foliage Focus and Root Zone in here. Ideally I would probably use the CCS in Root Zone because that helps establish warm roots, but I already have this pre-mixed and I'm lazy, so I'm just gonna, as a last step, pour the nutrient solution over it so that it's not gonna be flushed out by the water, right? If I do it the other way around, the water would flush out all the nutrients. Rather the other way around, specifically the new one, the top, specifically in the pot down here. The other one already has an established root system. The other one doesn't need to focus on roots. This one has plenty of roots and it has all of the leaves. This one just needs to reshoot. It's going to do it all by itself. I'm more worried about this new plant because that one needs to establish a healthy root system, because what else is going to support this big growth, right? You know, I'm a bit worried about this top cutting, but I suppose there are really good conditions around at the moment. You saw the conditions in that room that it's in, so it's at least in a really high humidity environment, so that should make it more manageable. Alrighty, I'm gonna clean up the mess in there and we'll be back in a sec. If you ever need to move really large plants through a doorway, go backwards, right? So they can't snap, they can only rip. I don't know if that's really encouraging. Alrighty, this is the bottom part. I mean, look, I can't miraculously make the yellow leaves go unyellow and so on, but I think it already looks slightly less messy in my humble opinion. So I'm not mad about it. I put that back in its pot. And I also thought I'll switch the position around between the Splendid and the Glorious, because the Splendid is now taller and I like it kind of this way, you know, from a positioning perspective. Still so big. Okay, looking good. I like it. Righty, for the other one I have this pot, technically not a good fit, but nice and deep, and you can't see in there, but I put lots of heavy pebbles in there. So these heavy pebbles are supposed to keep this all upright, hopefully. See how we go? Now of course over here with this plant I also can't miraculously fix the damage that incurred by it hitting the ceiling and so on, but I can give it a new home to hopefully ensure that future growth has full potential, and future growth has full potential to root into this pole over here, hopefully. Yes, these petioles are kind of in all directions right now, so they just need to correct themselves a little bit. I'm so exhausted, I'm so sweaty. Put the lights back. Now, I do need to rearrange this whole area. I think now that the Glorious is gone, I need to have a bit more flexibility to play around with this, but I think that's definitely a project for another day. I actually want to rearrange the entire office slash plant room to make it a little more functional for filming purposes and editing purposes as well. But for now, this will do. That was exhausting. But I hope you enjoyed this video. It was definitely chaotic, but maybe that just shows you that, you know, not everything goes smoothly, not everything goes according to plan. It's not always just copy and paste, you know. Every now and then things are slightly different and a little bit more challenging than anything I've done before, but that keeps it fun. I hope you found this entertaining, maybe a little bit useful as well, but if you want to learn more about my general chop and extend process with a more manageable plant, please check out the moss pole playlist that I'll link at the end screen. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye!